You want me to repeat the name in that?
Yeah, we're not gonna start the whole meeting over, but since
Okay.
we'll just have you, as soon as, are we ready? Just. Eventually, we gotta get this fixed. We're having so much trouble with it.
You want me to repeat the name in that?
Yeah, we're not gonna start the whole meeting over, but since
Okay.
we'll just have you, as soon as, are we ready? Okay, Mr. Dunaway, thank you. If you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Stephen Dunaway, 24 South Coy. You know, we're all going through the same thing. The city administration, the aggregate people with Palmer really did their due diligence with negotiating rates for us. However, some things came up which I thought would be nice to get on record. You know, the city can't tell people you should stick with the aggregate, but maybe after what I say, because I'm a citizen, I can say it, you should stick with the aggregate at the 975, all right? When you ask for information, I was asking for some information. I was doing some due diligence with people I still know at First Energy, some other connections I have. And then I came in here and Joel and Sandy, we had a little discussion and wow, she gave me a piece of paper. And it kind of sums it up. And for anybody that don't know about this, we are sure this has caused sticker shock for everyone. Unfortunately, everyone's bills are going up in comparison to the rates that we have seen in the past. The past 25 years of the aggregate, it's up, okay? It is important that residents understand that the renewal rate of 975 cents does not go into effect until June of 2025, which is when the new capacity rates go out. This is the big one. This is the one no one's going to like. Doing some due diligence, 4 years of Biden in office has permanently closed down 40% of all base load generation in this country. You don't replace a nuclear power plant or a coal plant overnight. We're trying to build a gas plant. I guess those don't get built overnight either. You know, it could be 2030 before we get the gas plant up and running. You can't do everything that this country wants to do. Electric cars, AI that gobbles up, one AI place is going to gobble up the electricity for a quarter of Northwest Ohio. So we need to have some due diligence, because here's the other part of what people should understand. When the suppliers deal with the aggregate, they're dealing with a government agency, which is made up of 12 governments. I'll fall back to when we were regulated as a utility. That rate is guaranteed. That rate cannot change. So depending on what happens with these capacity rates, it can't go up. We've already agreed upon it. If you go out and look for yourself, not only they can say it's guaranteed, but most of these suppliers are outside of this state, such as AEP. It's not a guaranteed rate, nor is there anything, unless you really look at the paperwork. They can, by Ohio law, they can cancel that rate if they notify you within 7 days of doing so. The law is built to keep these people from going bankrupt, protecting them. So it says that they negotiated in this letter here, knowing that the new capacity rate is going to be over 10 cents. So we got to be careful. I thought people should know. That's why I came tonight. And then just so everybody knows, if they didn't see this, I hope everybody on council's seeing this. This is the ad about the rest of what's going to happen to your electric bill. Were you aware of this? Now you're going to get the double whammy, because now Toledo Edison's going after their part. And I thank you very much. But one thing I would ask the city to do When I check on my neighbors, I don't know if my neighbor got back to you, but he was at 12 cents. It's real easy. We have two wonderful people that work for the city. We have Cassie and we have Sandy. Granted, she's retiring, but if you're not on the aggregate and the stuff that's going to happen at the end of June really gets nasty, the people that work for the city can pick up a telephone, call Palmer, and have it immediately changed. And not 2-week wait, 3-week wait. Cassie's done it for neighbors of mine, where literally they pick up a phone, and I think we need to add a little blurb in our website to let our citizens of our city know, okay, you thought you got it cheaper, but it's not gonna be cheaper, but we can fix it for them, because it's the right thing to do for our neighbors and our families.
Thank you, Mr. Dunaway.
Thank you.
Up next, that signed in to speak is Mr. Jeremiah Deagle. Mr. Deagle, if you would, please give your name and address for the record.
I'm Jeremiah Deagle. I'm here representing multiple groups and entities that I'll tell you about. I'm at 330 South Stadium Road. For those of you that may know me, I'm also pastor of Christ United Methodist Church and am working towards something I thought City Council should put on record, because you'll hear more about it to come. And so Steve invited me to come and at least explain to you briefly, and I will be brief about that. No sermons tonight, promise. But one of the things that has been working behind the scenes, many of you maybe know Cedar Creek on Seaman. There is a 3-acre approximate parcel of land there that's just basically overgrown. And there was some of us that behind the scenes started working to approach Cedar Creek about reusing that land for growing a city garden. What has come out of those conversations is the idea of a mission garden. And that idea would be that we would eventually plant that field and use the produce that's harvested from that to support local area food pantries and families that are facing food insecurity or dealing with difficulties on their own, but also seeing it as something that belongs to Oregon, not a church or not a group of churches, but rather the community of Oregon who can use that land to create opportunities for people to serve and help their neighbors. As we are going into the financial struggles that we face now, one of the things that we're facing at food pantries is a difficulty in acquiring fresh produce. And that land could produce tons and tons of locally harvested produce that's grown by our neighbors. So the idea is this, that we would eventually work towards that. The first thing is just to let people know who we are and what we're trying to do. The people who are involved right now are people from St. Ignatius, Cedar Creek, Christ United Methodist Church, neighbors of yours here in Oregon, as well as people from Oregon Health and Welfare, to name a few who have taken a vested interest in this piece of land. This year, it's a Hearts and Minds campaign. We've got 100 by 100 square that we are going to plant sunflowers in this year, and then invite the people of Oregon to come and get pictures and to be told about our garden that we hope to launch. And so this year it will be planting sunflowers, getting pictures, then eventually harvesting those sunflowers. Whatever little bit of money we can get from those, we'd use that money towards growing the garden and its awareness within the community. Eventually down the road, and why I'm here tonight is first to tell you what we're doing. If you have any information that you'd like to know, Steve, who is a member of this council, is a part of our team that wants to help do this. But beyond that, down the road, I was told as I met with Cindy Bench, they have agreed to sponsor by donating all the sunflowers this year. So there will be no cost. I am told, I'm not a gardener, that sunflowers grow well with dry climate. And so we won't need this year, which is good. But at some point in the future, as this idea grows, we would like to get a water meter out there for the garden brought in. And I'm not sure what all has to take place for that, but I wanted it on record that this garden is starting this year. If you'd like to get involved, let me know, or ask Steve how you can get involved, and then to get it as a matter of record that eventually, within a year or so from this date, we will be coming to you to see if the city would be willing to help us get a water meter installed so that we can get water to the garden in the future. With that, I just turn the time back over to you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Deagle.
Mr. President,
Mr. Major.
Jeremiah, Mr. Deagle, right? Yes. How would people get a hold of you? Or who do they, yeah,
My cell phone number is 419-575-4834. And the idea would, I guess I'd add, since you got me back up here for a second, that down the future, we do look at partnering with the Boy Scouts as creating Eagle Scout projects out of this, raised gardens for the people over at Thrive, the kids that come over and work on, plus over at Oregon Landings. We imagine bringing in lots of ways for the community to participate across an intergenerational level of interaction. And so the idea is much larger than we can accomplish in any one singular year. So first the idea, pictures, tell the story, and then from there, invite others to help us accomplish those goals. So,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Mr. Major, you finished? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our items tonight. The first item on the agenda for discussion is item 73 of 2025, and that's being presented by Mayor Safarian and our Assistant Fire Chief, Chief Mullins. And you're going to talk about 73 and 74 at the same time, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Council, as you have this information in front of you for both of these ordinances, 73 and 74, I'd like to talk a little bit about each of them individually and then together. Number 73, there was an increase for the chassis of over $8,000. That's something that we could not control since this first one was in 2022. That increase was from the Ford Motor Company that we had no idea was going to go up, but just like everything else, it just happened to go up. The second one was an increase of $21,219 for a grand total, both of these combined for $54,176. And I'd like to talk to you about both of these. With any project, we perform a final review before it goes to final design. We had some departmental changes from the time the trucks were actually spec'd out till today. The bulk of the changes are additional storage to accommodate the transition from the life squads going away, if you remember that, to what we have today and relying on the city to do the entire ALS for our entire city. The first truck was ordered in 2022 and the second truck was ordered in 24. Truck 1 chassis, as I said, changed the price and that caused an increase, and then the chassis price remained the same for number 2. At the time these trucks were ordered, it was still unclear whether or not ALS was going to go away for the county. We reviewed the specifications and made modifications that fit the needs for that ALS change. And in doing so, there are some things that we had to accommodate for, and that was extra storage as well as medications that we had to bring on board that required refrigeration. In doing so, those trucks that didn't originally have refrigerators on them now had to have refrigerators on them. From the manufacturer, it was very expensive, as you can imagine. So we did our due diligence and made sure that we got a cheaper refrigerator that worked just as well with the same type of warranty. We also added and accommodated additional electric in these vehicles because now we have ventilators from Zoll that require to be plugged in 120 volts with an inverter. So those are some of the changes that took place and the reason why this increase took place. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chief. Council,
Mr. President?
Ms. Ackerman.
Thank you. I'm sure this has a real simple, it just says black over red paint scheme for 4535 on both of the vehicles. Is that, I guess, for visual sake, is that just like some of it's going to be black, or like describe what that is, please?
Thank you. So as you look at Medic 42 now, which is at Station 2, that is the old life squad that was repainted to accommodate the paint scheme that we are now going to use. It'd be exactly like that vehicle, so the black and the red.
Okay, thank you. It made sense, but I was just like trying to picture why we'd go black on a rescue thing, but yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman.
Mr. President.
Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. this will probably be a very simple question, but we've had a lot of citizens questioning the emergency for the declaring emergency on our items. So again, I'm sure this is going to be a very simple question, being that it's fire-related, but if there could just be a short explanation on how this fits in with the charter definition of an emergency, if we could do that.
So as we already have delayed this project because of this, the longer that we wait, we don't know what's gonna change even more. So the sooner that we could get this done, it would save more money for us in the future.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. Council, anybody else? Hearing no additional questions, I will seek a motion to move item 73 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. We have a motion by Ms. Pauloff, second by Mr. Sandlander, to move item 73 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 73 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Chief Mullen already talked about item 74. Council, are there any other questions about item 74? Hearing none, Council, I will seek a motion to move item 74 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Paula.
so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sandlander. We have a motion by Ms. Paula, second by Mr. Sandlander, to move item 74 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, I will move item 74 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 75 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and our Public Service Director, Paul Roman. We'll go right to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to pay Hillebrand and Sons for an emergency water line valve repair at the southeast corner of Brown and Wheeling. There is a memorandum in the exhibit that explains the work and the costs associated with it. Main scope of work was really to replace a 12-inch valve off of a 16-inch trunk line. 12-inch line is actually one of two feeds to Bay Park Hospital. But when they uncovered, and actually I put in the exhibit the original PO, which was for half of the final cost, but originally we did not think there'd be this much work involved, but we discovered that the valve was directly underneath an AT&T concrete vault. You'll see pictures of it. It's a very large concrete structure. There's no way you can really get to it without relocating the duct, and therefore we had to extend the line out to put the valve further out. So it basically doubled the cost, but that's it. Again, it was emergency work, but this PO or this ordinance is really needed to pay the contractor in a timely manner. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council. Hearing no questions, I will seek a motion to move item 75 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you. Mrs. Pauloff?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pauloff, second by Mr. Wallenczak, to move item 75 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 75 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Our next item on the agenda for discussion is item 76 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into a bikeway license agreement to install a bikeway across the Fifth Third Bank property on Navarre Avenue. The actual project is the Oregon Trail Bikeway Phase 2 project, which will actually go from the Walmart traffic light across the Fifth Third property, up the Walmart property, and all the way to Star Avenue. We still have two other easements to acquire for this project, but this is one of them. What's interesting is it was brought to our attention that Fifth Third Bank would rather do a license agreement in lieu of an easement. They're very similar. A license only grants permission to be on the property, but it doesn't convey property interest. But we did write it so that it is perpetual and irrevocable. So it practically is an easement, and they are donating it. They asked for $1,000 for the legal fees, which seemed fair. So that's it. And again, reason for the emergency is, again, you want to clear the right-of-way so that you can proceed to construction as soon as possible and get it done in this season. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 76 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pauloff, second by Mr. Wallenczak, to move item 76 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none. Item 76 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 77 of 2025. That is being presented by Mayor Safarian and our Public Service Director, Paul Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into a preliminary design contract with Tetra Tech Incorporated. It's really for the potential installation of roundabouts at three Wind Road intersections, Corduroy, Pickle, and Brown. Out of 5 letters of interest that we receive, which again, on projects when there's a large engineering cost, you do have to seek qualification statements. We've done that. Tetra Tech was determined to be the most qualified. They're also partnering with DGL, which also does a lot of traffic design for the city. And they have their background information in the back. They've designed probably 45 roundabouts since 2009. I know 25 are in the Northwest Ohio area. The scope of work for this preliminary design is real simple. It is basically giving us the tools and information we need to submit for grant applications. And each year, TMCOG will have what's called their TIP improvement grant submittals, which are usually in July. ODOT will have safety grants 2 times a year, once in April. Actually, they may do it 3 times a year, but I know the next round is in August. And then OPWC always has their grant submittals in the fall. So the idea is to get a good sense of what's feasible at these intersections. You want to get an idea of how much right-of-way you would need, which you probably would for roundabouts. Again, a cost estimate, and just a basic alignment. Now, a lot of you have asked why. Why do we want a roundabout? And I can tell you in Oregon, and the problem I see, and I've been here a long time, are these 2-way stops. That's always the complaint. And I've said a lot that, and I'll say this too and foremost, that nobody wants accidents, nobody. But unfortunately, in traffic design, you need accidents to warrant a change. And when it comes to just adding stop signs, you can't just go from a 2-way to a 4-way stop unless there is 5 accidents or more per year, okay? And all 3 of these intersections average 3 to 4 accidents a year. In some cases, they may go no accidents for a year, and then all of a sudden they get 3 accidents in a row. Stadium and Cedar Point is that way too. Went a long period, and then you got 2 right off the bat. But the problem is, you cannot just add the stop signs. It seems simple, but you can't. And if you do, and there's more accidents, you're liable, especially if you didn't have a warrant to do it. When it comes to traffic lights, you need almost 800 vehicles an hour. These intersections are not that busy, so traffic lights can happen. But what I discovered last fall, and I've been on a lot of grant review committees, I was seeing these projects get grant dollars for like 1 accident a year. Putting in roundabouts. Roundabouts can be put in with less accidents a year. They're expensive. You do have to pay for right-of-way. And I think because of that, I'm very reserved to doing things like that unless I know I can get a grant. But have we tried? You know, and the idea is if you get one grant from one agency and then you use that to score another grant from another agency, the hope is to get 80 or 90% of these projects paid for. I don't think I would just do this though without grant dollars. You know, I really, and it's something you have to weigh. You know, I certainly, every time there's an accident, trust me, I'm asking for the report. I want to see it. We do quarterly review. We look at everything. And we just try to monitor and try to improve wherever we can. But the two-way stops have been difficult because they don't get enough accidents to warrant a change. And I do think these roundabouts would work. They're not going to reduce, it's not like you're not going to have accidents, but you would reduce the severity of it. And that's the goal. And I think Corduroy and Wynn actually is, out of the three, is probably the strongest candidate. There were 2 fatalities. You know, one was a medical issue. And a little bit longer ago. But I think from a safety grant perspective, it could be a very good candidate. Brown and Wynn will definitely have a lot more accidents as well, and Pickle isn't as many. Pickle has some difficulty, has 2 big culverts that we have to look at. Do they need to be moved or relined? And there's just a lot of details you want to look at. And I think, just like what we did with the safety routes, you know, Safe Routes to School grant application, you try to put together a preliminary design, you put together a letter, you send it out to the property owners that are affected, and you let them know, hey, we're applying for a grant, but if you got questions, we're not to detailed design yet, but if you got questions, let us know. And I did. I got a lot of calls for that, and that's good. You would do the same thing for something like this. This is a big deal. But anything we're proposing here are single-lane roundabouts. These are not the multi-lane. I would not, certainly to start out doing roundabouts in any city, I would never suggest doing multi-lane roundabouts. And so I think it seems like a lot to start, but that is 3 intersections. So really it's 30,000 per each, but when you think about the tasks that they're gonna do, it does get detailed. It does go towards the detailed design. These projects can easily hit $1 million, you know, with the right-of-way and everything else that's involved. Again, I can't see doing it without getting grant dollars before you decided to do it. But there's a lot of public meetings you'd want to do to coordinate this, and you're certainly dealing with the 4 people on the corners. And I noticed some comments on Facebook, and, you know, I think you think about the people on the corners and how they would react to the roundabout, but they're also the ones witnessing these crashes. And a lot of times they're the first to comment after every accident. So I think it's something that we need to go forward with it. I think we brought it up at budget, and I think to at least study it and look at it and see what's feasible and try to get grant dollars is what we're asking to do. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Council,
Mr. President,
Mrs. Ackerman.
obviously no secret, I'm really concerned about this situation. And I personally, myself personally, I like roundabouts, but it's not my house on the corner that's going to be impacted. So I spoke to a resident whose home is probably the closest to the intersection of the 3 intersections involved in this. And I was just curious that when I read through the information, this company, their record of how many that they've been involved with creating is impressive. And I mean, that I'm not concerned. They certainly seem to know what they're doing when it comes to roundabouts. I have a concern with, we had, this same company did conceptual roundabouts in 2020 and for Pickle and for Brown, and the property owner that I spoke to, who has been there certainly well before that, he has never received any type of communication with the city. And so if you have that and you know what the impact of it would be roughly, then it bothers me that we haven't had these one-on-one conversations at least with these people, if not public meetings because there are so many opinions about roundabouts, pro and con, but I'm mostly concerned with the people that are going to be their homes directly affected. And I would, especially, and then the cost of trying to cover the ditch, et cetera. So is it reasonable to ask to do the corduroy where you've not been given a conceptual roundabout plan for that one? I mean, is there any cost savings to asking for grant money? Are we more likely to get a grant if we're asking for one intersection to start with versus all three at once?
Mr. President, Mrs. Ackerman, those conceptual drawings were pro bono when we were looking at the concept of roundabouts, and it was brought up, Brown and Wynn and Pickle and Brown, to say, hey, what could be done? It was done as like, for them, for me and you, we maybe draw on a piece of paper. For them, they do it on a computer, and it looks real pretty, like they really did their work on that. But it was just a drawing. It's not a conceptual plan. It wasn't a preliminary design. This is detail. This is looking at what is physically feasible. That's different. And I think when you go to talk to people, you need to do your homework before you go to them. You can't just come up with an idea and go to them, and then it's just the opposite when you get into detailed design. Trust me. And when people ask me, is it possible to put a sewer down this road? And I said, no, not possible. And then one of my engineers says, oh yeah, it's doable. You know, things like that, you need to do your homework. And that's what this is. So that was just a drawing. What was your other question? I'm sorry, Ms. Secretary.
Oh, just, would there, $100,000 is a lot of money. And given, like, as Mr. Dunaway would point out,
Yeah.
we need fire, we
Yeah.
need, we have safety needs. So 3 seems like a big chunk to bite off, but explain maybe to me with the grant process.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering,
Well-
would we be more likely to get a grant if it's just for one to start, to see, kind of get Oregon's feet wet? I mean, we have
Yeah.
one roundabout, but it's a small one, and it's not encountered by a lot of the citizens on a regular basis yet. So just asking for the sake of and also with the $100,000, would we recoup that with the grant money?
Well, keep in mind now, so it's possible. Let me say this. You got to spend money to make money sometimes. And when it comes to grant writing, well, like Navarre Avenue, safety improvement, it's a $7.2 million project. It started with a safety study for about, I think it was probably 60 grand with DGL. We ended up getting a $5 million grant, and then we got another $600,000 grant, and then we got another $600,000 grant. You can say, boy, should you have spent that $60,000? Well, you ended up with tenfold in grant dollars. I mean, it's hundredfold. I think, unfortunately, you got to spend money to make money sometimes, and yeah, it seems like a lot, but it is going after grant dollars. The hope is you get 80 to 90% paid for. Some cases it will include engineering. Sometimes the grant submittal's not competitive if you include the engineering cost, but you are getting big dollars for grants, so it does pay off. So yeah, I know it's hard at first when you see it. I think you probably would submit one project at a time and try to get more grant dollars. That way you'd submit 3 separate projects, get 3 separate rounds of grant dollars would get the most versus putting it all together. But sometimes one intersection may score better than in the other, and by grouping the 2 together, maybe you get a better score. Just depends. That's part of the math. Okay.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Council, any other questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I do have a few. I guess unlike Ms. Ackerman, I am not a fan of them. I travel all throughout the Midwest, and I see these things, and I see where they put 2 of them together, and they lump in 2 lanes around with high traffic and high density. Most people were not learning to drive with roundabouts. So it is a new function and a new traffic flow to them. Most people don't know how to drive around roundabouts. Wynn Road is our semi-truck route, north and south through the city. If you go out to Waterville, and I'll let alone all the places in Indiana, every place else that I see them, but let's just talk about Waterville. They put the first roundabout out there, and within a month, there were semi-truck tire marks going right through the center of it. People don't know that these are there, they're not used to driving them. So I'm just gonna set aside, that's my personal preference. I see these, I understand the safety idea to it. There's a lot of ideas with safety. If you look at Central Avenue, if you look at the 25 Exchange in Perrysburg, there's those that would tell you those are wonderful safety things. I would argue, I think they were somebody's pet idea that caught wind, and all of a sudden, they start building these things. Reverse flow traffic, roundabouts, there's all kinds of different things. If each of these areas on their own, and I'm not discounting the safety aspect of this, so please don't misinterpret that. But if any of these three areas in and of themselves do not warrant a change in traffic based on the 5 accidents per year to make a consideration, are there other things that can be done in those areas that could improve safety? I know there was a time back, and Ms. Polliff, I believe, was very active in it, where we reduced speed limits on Corduroy Road to try to help some of that's going on. If we have other things in our community happening as we believe we will over the next few years, there's gonna be a lot more traffic through that area. I'll let you speak to that first, but I've got more.
Appreciate it. No, well, let me say this, that I respect your view, and in terms of trucks in general, roundabouts are designed so that there's always an inside apron that the trucks drive over. And now, if you drive Millard Avenue, so if you're in North Oregon and you're traveling to Toledo, you're gonna go through 2 roundabouts, and those are giant. You know, they're made for trucks, and but they do drive over the apron, and that's the design. Rossford at Lime City, same thing. They're all designed to accommodate trucks, and you are certainly allowed to drive over the aprons. Trying to think of your other questions.
No, just about other opportunities for improving safety at these.
Oh, well, and that's the thing, and that's what we've struggled with. You know, we put the backlight lights, two-way stop, cross traffic does not stop. We've tried everything. Corduroy, I think we removed the flashing light because I think it was causing accidents. You know, people thought the blinking yellow was a blinking red, so they thought the other direction was stopping. We think that was a mistake. We learned through ODOT those shouldn't exist, so we removed it. And again, we added the backlit lights, I mean, we've done everything you can do for these two-way stops. I don't know what to do. If you don't go to something like this, and you don't go to 5 accidents, you're gonna always average 3 to 4 accidents, and life goes on until you get more traffic, and maybe you warrant something bigger. But again, you need 800 vehicles an hour for a traffic light. That's not easy to warrant, and that's the problem. But trucks can be accommodated. And I look, and I'm not in love with them as much as you think. I can tell you, when you drive McCord Road and you go into a two-way, you think twice, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the beauty to roundabouts. You're thinking about it as you go through, all right? You're conscientious as to what you're doing. I've been through green lights thinking, was that a green light? You know, I mean, I'm wondering, you know, are you just going about your daily routine? When you go through a roundabout, you're thinking, you're looking to the left, and then you're yielding and going in. So it does make you think, yes, it does. And it is safer when it comes to an accident versus a T-bone versus a sideswipe. That is the difference.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Walensek.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, can we put a 4-way stop?
That's the
I
point,
mean-
Mr. Walzak. It's not warranted is the
You
problem.
don't have enough accidents.
There's not enough accidents. You need 5 or more. That's the problem.
Who designates that it's not warranted?
The state of Ohio, Uniform Traffic Code.
Okay? And I understand if we add a stop, we would be potentially liable in an accident.
That's correct. You would have to show why that was warranted, and if you can't, then you are liable for that accident. That's the
Even if they
problem.
run a stop sign.
Well, that would be, you could debate it,
If
but
you
there's going to be.
establish a 4-way stop there and
Well,
somebody
what-
runs it, we're liable?
If the 4-way stop was not warranted, you could be very well liable, yes. Yes.
Do we, are there
And
any,
that-
are
that's-
there any
see-
intersections in the city of Oregon that don't
So-
meet that?
Well, I believe everything that we have is warranted. I can tell you that the concern at Brown and Wynn, even if you could just, let's say you had 6 accidents a year, I'd still be concerned that on Brown Road, they're going so fast that they're never gonna stop for a stop sign. They're just gonna roll through it. And the problem at Pickle and Wynn is Wynn is the wrong stop street. Pickle should be the stop street. Wynn should be the through street. But if you reverse it, you're gonna get more accidents. That's the problem. That's the problem with these. We've looked at it left and right.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
sorry.
I'll
Mr.
come back
Horniak.
to it.
Mr. Roman, the corner of Lallendorf and Star, how many accidents did it take to change that into a 4-way?
Yeah, we had, well, and it got to close to 5. It was, I'll say 4.5. There was a motorcycle accident, and I think there may have been a fatality there. We had good reason, really simply due to the S-turn in Star Avenue. When you leave Pearson Park, make a left, and you're heading west, you automatically come to a stop, whether there was a stop sign or not. And that's what we noticed, and that was the problem. And that was enough for us to warrant going to a 4-way stop.
Because that one completely
It was hard.
eradicated
It was right
every-
on the edge for a long time.
But it stopped all accidents dead in
think
their
so.
tracks, so to speak, but
Yep.
it stopped them immediately.
It was really a site, so Mr. Wallen's, there can be other warrants such as site distance and, a lot of times traffic lights get warranted because there's a school close by,
I understand that at the corner of Wynn and Corduroy, you do have some sightline issues on the trees that were cleared up about 10 to 15 feet on the property there to provide better sight lines for the stopped flow of traffic. Are there other sightline issues at the other ones that could
Brown and
warrant it?
Wynn, yeah, Brown and Wynn, and we do try to go to those property owners if they're not in the right of way, and we try to trim back as much as we can. The other thing about roundabouts, I know the concern about someone driving through a roundabout, but they do slow you down. And that is the idea, but sometimes a stop is, when a stop sign's unwarranted, trust me, they're not stopping, they're rolling through it, and that's that false sense of security. That's the problem with, the stop signs, and they shouldn't be used to slow traffic. They should be used to stop traffic and direct traffic. That's what stop signs are for.
Mr. President?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Horniak.
Just a couple follow-up pieces. The 3 intersections that you're talking about, Mr. Roman, are those, I'll use the term, most dangerous 3 intersections in Oregon?
I would not say that. I think, I would say for a long time, Coin Navarre was. And we've done improvements, and I'd still say it can be dangerous. So even with traffic lights, an intersection can be dangerous. I think your most dangerous intersections are with traffic lights right now. I'm saying that these 3 are probably the best candidates for roundabouts.
Okay. And in all 3 cases, I'm going to say there's significant ground or easement that would have to be obtained
Right away.
at
yes.
all 3 of the intersections.
Yeah.
Right? And the expectation in today's dollars with what we believe we know, we're talking about $1 million per. Best guess today.
Construction with right away, yeah. It'd probably be, I'll say 1.1, 1.2 million per intersection
Okay.
with right away.
So at today's expectation.
Yeah.
By the time we study it, look at it, we're probably a couple years down the line, which is going to
Yep, that's
impact
true.
that by probably 20 or 30%.
Yep.
At what we're looking at today with inflationary rates and everything else.
Yep.
So in acquiring that and going through that with spending the $100,000, and this is kind of my next line of questions, if you can speak to it, and some of it is speculation. Over the past 12 months, and seeing what we've seen and heard coming out of the state and budgets and expenditures and restrictions on expenditures, have they been more willing in the last 12 months to grant new roundabouts, or have we seen that start to become more limited?
Well,
Are the funds more limited these days than they were when they first started doing these?
I would say not on the transportation side. On the LSIP, OPWC, the utility side, that's why the OPWC has their vote coming out here soon. We actually have resolution on for it. LTIP though, which is the transportation, it's almost the same amount. Those rounds are still out there. And OPWC also has their own LTIP that they do provide as well. I don't see that. I think, obviously, we're gonna argue safety for this. Those safety dollars are still out there. Yes.
Okay. Because I always, you know, and as we went through our budget process and as we've talked over the last several years, especially into this year too, about being a little bit more conservative with budgets and projections and our expenditures and things that we eliminated from the budgets and those, we talk about support of our safety services and trying to find funding for that. I mean, we've gone to a point where there's been the discussion, much to Mr. Dunaway's dismay, about the 0.25% increase in income tax to fund safety services. So I always look at all of these things in that. And the one thing I kind of go back to, and I'm going to kind of harken back to this, and somebody can check me on the record because I'm paraphrasing numbers and things from the past. So my memory may not always be perfect, but a few years ago, we paid $200,000 roughly to study algae blooms in Lake Erie. When we all knew that algae blooms in Lake Erie are not a good thing, and we know primarily where they come from. And about a year and a half, 2 years later, we were asked for another $100,000 to do another study about algae blooms in Lake Erie. If these are dangerous areas, if we believe that to be the case, and understand this gives you your blueprint plan to be able to proceed with, but aren't we spending money to study something that we already know?
Well, this is not a study. This is a preliminary design. This is actually laying out an improvement and putting together enough data to go after a grant, to actually bring dollars in. That's different. You know, the algae bloom, I'm sure we have the same view on that. And whether that was a purpose, I think, we've gone to ozone at the water plant. I feel very strongly about that, killing anything that comes in off the lake in terms of microcystin. And we got a lot of grant dollars for that. But if you recall that had a huge preliminary design as well. And it pulled in a lot of grant dollars. And it's just part of the process. It's different to do a preliminary design to get grant dollars versus a study just for the sake of doing a study. This is different than that. And you still have accidents at these intersections. For the two-way stops, there's nothing you can do until they hit 5 accidents a year.
Right, and we've never achieved that.
No.
In those areas, you said 3, maybe 4.
Yes.
Is the highest accident, and not discounting the safety need of something to be done with that.
Correct.
I'm always just a little hesitant about, in your case, spending money to make money. I'd say spending money to acquire money might be the better term for that.
And trust me, Mr. Horniak, I totally agree with you. I'm very conservative. I can't see really doing these projects unless they get a grant. But I think it's worth trying for, and I'm seeing other Lucas County communities get these dollars with less accidents. So I'm confident.
Okay.
For one accident, yeah. In Holland. I don't know that.
All right, so if we went ahead with, I'll say this, detailed planning, and we submit, the next process is submitting for grant, or do you have to start that conversation with the landowners around there to say what is the possibility of acquiring the easement?
First of all, you would do a preliminary design to lay out what you think is feasible right away and so on, and probably send letters out with a detailed drawing of what we're planning, and to certainly come and see us and if you have questions. And then at the same time, say that you are applying for grants and let them be aware of it. Same as we did for Safe Routes to School. You would do the same thing here. That's basically how we would start out. I guess, are you asking, what more beyond that you're asking?
Well, I'm just saying, assume we do this. Is it applying for the grant next, or is it taking that to the public next?
It's kind of, well, it would go to the immediate property owners that are close by. You can certainly go to the public, but I think even then, you may even, I tell you, in today's world, you'd almost want to have the public meeting before you even accept any grant dollars for this, because I've seen communities who turned it down and then that community lost scoring on future grant submittals. So I think we would take it very serious to have public meetings for it.
So community input,
Oh, yeah.
in your opinion, would be more important before
Yes,
grant
definitely.
submission and information?
Well, I think if you submit a grant that looks like there's right-of-way involved with the property owners that are involved, I think those people need to know about that before you submit that grant, and that's very important. We could have public meetings prior to it as well. I think it's something to focus on where no matter what, you're having public meetings and getting support before you accept grant dollars, for sure.
Okay. And then the last question I have, and I'll let others chime in if they choose to with this, and I'd probably ask anybody in here who controls or plans a budget. If we had an extra $100,000, how many people could find what they figure a priority within their department or division to be able to spend this on? And that's rhetorical, nobody has to answer. But I'm guessing there's many people that would say, I've got a place we could use that. And again, as we consider
I get it.
budgetary concerns, we have to look at the priorities we've put in place,
Trust me.
which is fire, safety, other things that we've prioritized as a community. And this is $100,000 that detracts from one of those other priorities to study something that we may or may not even eventually want, and may or may not eventually be able to even proceed on. So with that, I'd close.
And if I could, Mr. President, I just said, I do think we have the road program, and I can tell you, Oregon has done a lot of bike paths, right? And in all those years, and I've been here 29 years, in all those years, we've done miles and miles of bike paths. And I always hated the thought of people knowing I'm doing bike paths, and yet the roads are unpaved. You always had $1 million worth of roads to pave, but the question is, should you still proceed with a bike path? Well, we did because we got grant dollars to do it, and that's why you did it. And you can't ignore quality of life. I mean, a lot of money gets spent out back, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, I have roads to do. Why are we building the things out back when we don't have money to pave a road, fill a pothole? So I agree with you, but it's a balance act, and I wouldn't suggest this unless I thought we could get grant dollars.
Fair enough. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Major.
Mr. President, thank you. And I wanted to kind of address some of that and just kind of globally some things. I know we all talk to different circles of people, and the people that I talk to are in favor of at least and you can fault me or credit me for having the Pickle and Wynn intersection on there. I know some of the residents that live nearby there, and they would love to have a roundabout there because they know the dangers, the near misses. What's not counted in the traffic studies and the counts of accidents is near misses, where cars are driving off the road because they're trying to dodge somebody who's not doing the right thing, who's running a stop sign or whatever. And I'll tell you that at that intersection in particular, a lot of the turnaround workers from the refineries will drive down that road. They don't know our traffic laws. They don't know our speed limits. They're just new to the area, and they're driving in and out of different places. And a lot of times they'll take Wynn out to wherever they take it towards Perrysburg to cut over to get on 75. So that's and this person's used to work for one of the contractors. So he is very attuned to this intersection. In fact, some of his family members were in accidents at that intersection. That's why he's so concerned about this intersection. And we talk about warrants, and he's been, for lack of a better word, complaining about this intersection for years. Also, and again, I've only been here 2.5 years, so I don't know all of the history, but I can tell you that when that fatality happened at Corduroy, man, did the phone start ringing. And that was when, we figured out, talking with Paul and Rodney and everybody else, getting together, that the flashing light had to go. But that's not and a roundabout's not a fix. But statistically, it proves that safety is improved. And nobody's disputing that, right? Nobody's disputing the safety factors that go with roundabouts. And there are some sightline issues with some of these properties that you know, there would be some intrusion onto some of the properties to help address some of the sightline issues. So I get that aspect of it. So I think that's you know, the $100,000 going towards this could net a bigger chunk, certainly. But of course, you know, and I've heard people bring up grant writing before, and maybe even hiring a grant writer. Well, you're paying for the position, and then any grant you write, you're going to have to match it, right? So you can write all the grants in the world, but you're going to have to match them. You're going to have to do preliminary designs on a lot of things to be able to put yourself in position to be very competitive, to get grant money. And this is, you know, that's part of the risk of this, but is that there's no guarantee that grant money would come in. But I mean, it comes down to that the people that I've talked to there are a lot of people that don't like roundabouts, but there are a lot of people that don't mind them. They would prefer them, or and especially that one intersection, they want it there. They want something done. And I know that Paul and Rodney and everybody else in the team, put the police in there too. They meet up and they talk about these intersection issues. And these are those one-offs that you can't just throw in a sign. It's not that easy. I wish it was. I wish there was a quick fix to this. But, you know, I'm just saying, you know, and where would you put your $100,000 if you could put it somewhere else? That's a tough question because, you know, every department has needs. I would say that this is a worthy expense because then it helps bring to light some of the detail that the engineers are looking for to solve a real problem that is in our community. It's a long-term fix for some of the issues that we see at these intersections. I think that's worthy of spending the $100,000. You know, when I see requisitions come across the munis all the time, I take a look at them when we review the budget. I mean, this is one of those things that, in my opinion, is worthy of this community spending a little bit extra to find out what exactly we can do at this intersection to make it safer. And maybe it's not a roundabout. Maybe we find out that the roundabout isn't the right solution, but, you know, if we don't look at it, how are we going to know? That's just my opinion. I think that this is, and I know that, you know, the budget is tight. I get that, and I believe that some people thought there was a little bit of sticker shock when we went through the contract negotiations too. You know, when the wages went up, but I can tell you that the wages in other communities have surpassed the wages of what we have in our contracts. Actually went higher. So at one point we were at the top, and I think we got passed up by 3, maybe 4 other communities around us. So that's, you know, the inflation thing is real, the budgetary issues are real, but the funding for a potential solution for these intersections is out there. And the only way to get to that solution is through this process to be the most competitive that we can be. So I wanted to get on my soapbox and just give everybody my opinion on this because I do think it's important. That's my opinion. I would advocate for this just because I don't think there's any time like the present to help solve some of the problems. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr. Major.
Mr. President?
Mrs. Paula?
Thank you. Speaking off of Joel, you can see it from the city standpoint, but I know several families on Pickle, east of Wynn, that won't even go to that intersection. And every time they do, they have a mishap, or there's an accident, or a near miss. So when you're sitting in this position and you're hearing that aspect of it, you have to pretty much act like, okay, money's no object, what can we put there? If money wasn't an object at all, we still have to do something at that intersection. So we have to look at the guidelines through the state of Ohio. So either way, something has to be done, and if we can't put a 4-way stop there, then what's the next step? Because something really has to be done at these intersections. I don't understand why that flashing yellow light was there on Corduroy. I think it's really senseless to just have that one little area at 35 miles an hour when you're coming off 45 plus, because nobody is going down Corduroy Road at 45 miles an hour, not even me. Because I'm gonna speed, because once you get the momentum, you're going 45 miles an hour, and then you have to slam on your brakes. Well, yeah, he knows. So I am in favor of doing some kind of study to see how we can make these intersections safer, because would this $100,000 help out the police and fire? Absolutely, because if there's no accidents, there's no calls. So, you know, it is a great balancing act, and I think that this would be a good use of it, only because the residents are the ones that are living these intersections.
Thank you, Ms.
So,
Powell.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm going to go into the little discussion about traffic warrant studies. Back in the 90s, the Ohio Department of Highway Safety recommended that we go and check on some of our signage in the city because we were putting ourselves in a liable situation. And we cleaned up a lot of signs, especially in subdivisions that were stop signs where they weren't warranted. But one of the things that caught my mind, I believe at that time, there were 7 signs in the city that said, "Caution, children playing." Caution, children playing in the state of Ohio amounted to children being hit, and damages were awarded to them at the liability of the municipalities they were in, because they said, when you say caution, children playing, you were saying they were allowed to play in the street. And they said they recommend we remove those immediately, which we did do. And so it doesn't seem real that, like I know Mr. Rome was asked, you could be held liable for an accident. Well, I don't know about held liable, but you can be charged damages, big financial damages. And I know at that time, I don't know if you were here yet. What year did you start? I think it was before then. And we had taken out quite a few signs, especially in the subdivisions, that the state said were definitely not warranted. And we were in a bad liable situation for having them there. And I remember a guy had a children playing sign, and he said, and it was on Warden Road, and he said, "Could you put that in?" And we actually did. And then he come in and complained when we, a few months later, took it out. But the state takes that serious.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr.
I
Horn.
do have a follow-up with that. And I guess, Joel, just to kind of speak to some of your comment. And I haven't found those people that told me they love roundabouts. So wherever they are, send them over. I'd love to hear from them. But my guess is when accidents have happened, the comment and conversation you had was not, "Oh my God, we need a roundabout." The conversation was, "We need to do something about this." Right? Not necessarily the roundabout, but the roundabout seems to be the way around the state's requirements of a more significant number of accidents at each of the intersections. The people at Coy, or at Pickle and Wynn, talked to several of those folks around there. They are petrified of that. I don't like going through that intersection because most people aren't paying attention. The other side of that whole thing that we're missing with this is we can take all the precaution that we want. We still have a massive amounts of distracted drivers on the roads. I drive 40,000 miles a year. The scariest thing I see is the people looking down on their lap every 5 seconds because, God forbid, they not get the last message and answer it within 10 seconds. I see it every day, all day long. I say, give me the person driving with their knee, eating a sandwich, because that person's been doing that for 20 years and they know how. That person who's looking down, it takes only a split second. We all know, it takes a split second. So are there other things we can do? Because my guess is the comment was not, Joel, we need a roundabout. It was, Joel, we have to do something. It's enough of these already. And I agree with that. And I'd like to look at other opportunities. The question I have is, if that is the predominant safety issue, is at Corduroy and Wynn, could we study one? And look at doing one, which would lessen your exposure, because my guess is if all three came back, and it's going to be highly recommended by the consultants and the designers that you should do all these, we're going to submit them. But my guess is the most challenging of the three intersections is the one that would be most likely considered for grant dollar support. Is that fair to say? The most dangerous of the three? And if we're saying, is that the one?
I think, well, I would say Brown and Wynn is just as tied with Corduroy. I think Pickle and Wynn is a little less, but I think both are just as feasible. I think, our ask would be to submit all three as grant submittals if we can get them, but I wouldn't do them together. I think it's smarter to do them separate to get more grant dollars. Now, whether you could get enough, score several projects in one round, I don't know. No, I think my ask is to have all three prepped where you're just applying for as the grants come. You never know when new stimulus dollars or anything else comes out. Infrastructure is always, in terms of economic builders, a lot of times, the Tiger grants early decades ago, but we scored a lot of money from Tiger grants. Being prepared for grants is much better than not being prepared, I can tell you that.
Understand. So in that, and I know at some point in time, and I want to say it was somewhere around the time that we were doing public hearings before Buffalo Rock was coming in, and we were considering that change and that special use at that location, there was discussion of Seaman. Seaman is probably the main artery into our high school. Anybody ever sat around at 7:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and watch what goes on up and down Seaman? Why isn't Seaman considered part of this? Why doesn't that make sense to study Seaman at Wynn?
And with the traffic light, being there, that's controlling traffic. It comes down to the efficiency of that traffic light. Is it at a level of service that's low? I don't think we have any issue right now. I know the light is programmed to be longer on the green when school's out. No, we don't have that problem right now, but I can tell you, like at Brown and Coy might be a candidate for a traffic light, not a roundabout, so it just depends. So it's not the answer to everything. I think we were looking at it more for the two-way stop intersections.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll close with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you,
Mr. Roman.
Mr. Horniak. Council, any further questions?
Mr. President,
Mrs. Ackerman?
roundabouts are designed for drivers at 15 miles an hour. The same idiots that don't heed our existing laws and go through stop signs, blow them, that's usually the cause of Brown and Wynn. And if anybody remembers the young man who was killed on his bike, that was a tragedy. And yeah, like Ms. Paul said, that a lot of people avoided that whole intersection just because of that particular situation. But I don't, it's not going to fix the idiot factor. I've been to a lot of cities that have a lot of roundabouts, and the people that enter them at a higher rate of speed, especially if you're asking them to come down from 50 miles an hour to, or 45 to 15, they're not going to. And there are still a lot of accidents, and they're not always side swipes because people entering them, if you're not looking, you're hitting somebody broadside. We're going to deal, it's the same scenario, and I just don't know how you fix stupid, which is what we have an abundance of when it comes to drivers disregard and the distracted drivers. They're the cause of the majority of them. My nephew was, a woman pulled out in front of him as he was going down Brown Road on his motorcycle. Thank God he had a helmet on. But she, quick look, and just took off, and he, right in front of him, and thank God he's alive. But I just don't, I know, like I said, I personally like roundabouts, but $100,000 for us to give them, let them review crash data at intersections, provide a summary of the data for each intersection, travel analysis, traffic analysis. You guys are already doing that. Our city's already performing those things. So I hate to go spend that over again. I mean, can we start out and say, and go to the owners of the 12 parcels that DGL would do a boundary survey for? They said estimated 12 parcels. Can we ask them, you know, those owners, if, I know, you guys are the city, you want to tell them what they're going to do, not ask them, but their
Mr. President.
cooperation would be a lot easier hill to climb than, you know, to know they're on board with it, that, like you said, they want to see those safer, they don't want to see the accidents. Maybe if we could come back and tell everyone, we've got public support for these things, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about spending $100,000.
Well,
Mr. Roman.
Well, let me say this, Mr. President, Mrs. Ackerman, you know, and to all of you, this is teamwork, by the way. We're doing work in-house with these guys. We're actually, William might be going out doing turn counts and collecting data. Rodney is certainly involved. Both Rodney and myself are involved in the actual grant submittals. They're not necessarily writing the grant, they're just supporting us on it. A lot of it is the cost estimate and the layout. You know, just the idea of the right-of-way. They know what ODOT is going to expect or require in the future plans. So that it is really teamwork. We kind of fought for this price to get it down to 100,000, you know, because we're also doing work alongside them. But we can't do all of this. We need their expertise to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any further questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a lot of discussion going on, a lot of good stuff. So thank you, Mr. Horniak, for your insight as well on that. So what you're saying then is if we did not get any grant, we would not proceed beyond this? Is that, or you would expect to not?
I think when you look at cost-benefit analysis, I think if you have zero grant dollars and you're looking at everything else you're looking at budget-wise, you're probably going to second-guess doing it. Doesn't mean you still can't, you still could do it.
Yeah.
But part of me says, well, yeah, but these are expensive projects. I would only want to go forward if we got grant dollars. That's my view.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, you know, like has been said many times, you know, with our budget constraints right now and wanting to take care of our safety services, you know, it's obviously every little penny counts. That being said, and with as much discussion as just we've had right now, and I know there's a lot going on social media as well, could it maybe be a consideration and maybe we don't do it as an emergency and do it over the 30 days to be able to give options for people to ask questions and come in?
And it's fair to ask for that, Mr. Salander, but I can tell you the first rounds of grants are in July. I know the safety grant for ODOT is in August, and then OPWC is in the fall. This is 10 weeks worth of work. This is going to get you to probably the first week of July. Right now, passing it next week.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking for it to be an emergency.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. Council, anything further? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 77 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pauloff, second by Mr. Wallenczak to move item 77 of 25 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 77 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 78 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into a temporary easement and work agreements with the Joseph Brothers for the Navarre Avenue Safety Improvement Project. They were our last right-of-way acquisition. If you recall, we did an ordinance as if we were going to eminent domain. We knew we were close to an agreement, which we did come to one. The easement descriptions are included in Exhibit A. And really, in essence, the Joseph Brothers are donating their easement in exchange for the city to relocate their drive that's currently at the traffic light right there by, in front of Planet Fitness and by Ralphie's, to move that drive 70 foot to the east in exchange for the easements. And we've agreed to that. We can do it as, we've done this before. We did it for Dunn, for other projects, but ODOT does allow you to do these barter exchanges for this. So they are donating it, but we are moving their drive as well. We believe it's fair compensation for the ask. So that's it, and that's the last, and our hope is to go to bid sometime in June. I mentioned there's a lot of grant dollars that came in for this project, and this is the last thing we needed to go to bid. So we did tell ODOT, or we were required by ODOT to certify our right-of-way by the first week of April, which is this week. They probably wanted this ordinance a week ago, but we told them that we did come in agreement and they would allow it. So again, I asked for the emergency is to pass it so we can certify the right-of-way to ODOT. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 78 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Horniak.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. We have a motion by Mr. Horniak, second by Ms. Pauloff to move item 78 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 78 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Next on the item on the agenda for discussion is item 79 of 2025 being presented by Mayor Safarian and our city administrator, Joe Major. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what this legislation would do is allow it would enter into a contract with Shoemaker Advisors. And I know we had talked about establishing a lodging tax during the budget discussions that we had late last year and early, or we had some follow-up this year. But essentially, a municipality, the state of Ohio has allowed a municipality to enact a lodging tax for hotels, motels, and other lodging type places, which would include Airbnbs, by the way. But it allows up to 3%, and then even more so, they've allowed up to 6%. Basically what it does is it applies to all transactions where there's lodging at a hotel. Typically, lodging taxes are, a lot of municipalities have them throughout the state. City of Oregon is one that does not. And a lot of what lodging taxes are collected, what they usually go to are to help promote the city, events in the city, and things like that, and assist, chambers of commerce and things like that with events that they put on. So I know that Mr. Wallenczak had brought this up as well as a potential to establish one. Now, Shoemaker Advisors, I will say one thing about them is that essentially what this would be is to help have the city hire Andy Herf. Andy Herf is in Columbus with Shoemaker Advisors, and he's the individual that's written most of that code in the lodging tax code, the state code. So I guess with that, I don't know if, I guess I'll just stop there, and if anybody has any questions, we can go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Major, I appreciate you bringing this forward. If we are able to obtain this through the state of Ohio, through legislation in the state of Ohio, it could bring $150,000 to $200,000 annually to the city of Oregon, and I believe it would have to be designated to travel and tourism, so that could help with city events. Therefore, we're not taking stuff out of general fund dollars to coordinate and establish our community events. So I do think this would be a worthy cause and a worthy expenditure to obtain that type of money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
And Mr. President, if I may.
Mr. Major?
It's $30,000. That's the ceiling on this. the mechanism for this would be to write a code section in there that fits the city of Oregon and have it put into the state budget. And that's common, that's how most of these get actually put in there. If you look at the code itself, it's really nuanced, and a lot of the things that are written in the code are very specific to certain cities. So just to kind of give you a little background about how the lodging tax code works at the state level, it's really nuanced. Yeah, one of the things too, coming out of this, if this is successful, we would have to establish a visitors bureau too, which a lot of them are kind of done out of the Chamber of Commerce at the same level, just a separate board and everything else. But yeah, you're correct, about 150 to 200,000.
And this is just a first start. I mean, obviously,
Yes.
we do this. There's steps that will come after this. Reached out to the auditor's offices, figured out exactly how much, what percentage gets us in return, how much capacity and how many people are staying in those rooms, how many rooms are annually being rented out to people. So this is just the beginning. We have work to do on our end to make sure that we're ready to put this into the budget.
Yep, and I would suggest the 3%. That's the kind of the going rate, 2 to 3%, and that would yield the $150,000 to $200,000.
Yeah. And at some point in time, we reach out to the hotels, find out what their occupancy rates are, work with the county auditor's office, and then put that together, because that information will have to be delivered to Shoemaker to
Yep.
finish this work.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
just a couple questions on this, Joel. Any idea of a timeline? I mean, assuming all goes according to Plan A, any idea of a timeline when this could be approved and acted and where we can actually put this into play within Oregon?
Mr. President, Mr. Horniak. So this would be in the state budget, so the state budget's got to pass and starts July 1st.
Okay.
So I don't know if there are any follow-up steps at this point. If it's passed, if we have to come back to council to enact that and go through the auditor's office, what steps need to take place after that. But as soon as we get all of those steps into place, we can start collecting. If it doesn't start right on July 1st, my estimate would be that sometime within the next 90 days is when we would be able to get something set up so that then we could start collecting on it and then using those funds for.
So potentially by year's end?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes, if it was
And-
not by year's end, I would be.
Okay. Second question I have on that. So you talked about it has to be used in travel and tourism mechanisms, if you will. Can part of that be, and I know a couple of us a few years back had talked as we were talking about the property maintenance code and things of that nature, about perhaps a beautification grant for businesses in some of our, say, Navarre Avenue corridors, other corridors where there could be a matching grant fund if somebody wanted to update or improve their facade, the exterior of their building, whatever it may be, make that whole area more marketable. Could those funds be used for something like that, to support something like that?
That's a great question. For beautification, yes. If it's city, like flower pots on Navarre Avenue or something like that, yes. Or, improved city signage or whatever, yes. As for using the funding as grants to private property owners, even if we're for facade improvements, you mean? That I'm going to have to look into.
Okay. Yeah, I'd appreciate you looking into that,
that's-
if you would.
Yep.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Mr. President,
Ms. Ackerman.
if Lucas County is at 8%, and then you add the 7.25% sales tax, and I'm just curious, when I got online and tried to book at 3 different hotels in Oregon today, and they came up for my final price as, and anybody can go on, feel free to jump on and try to get a room, but it was the 7.25% and then 10% tax at 3 of the hotels in Oregon. So I was wondering if you could explain, like, why if Lucas County is at 8%, what is that other 2% tax?
Mr. President,
Mr.
I'll have to
Major.
look into that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what
If you,
taxes that the county
it's.
leverages against lodging.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to anybody that's gone to Florida or any vacation places, you've got there's your per week, per night or per week, but then there are all the added, do we wanna, is that gonna put us higher? If they're already have it at 10%, is it gonna say 13% plus your 7.25% tax? I want to attract people here and not chase them away. If they've got other choices in the Toledo, the surrounding area, or if people are going to go to Cedar Point, I mean, I want to be the reason they stop here on their way, on their travels. And I just don't know about raising the taxes if it's worth the, so. I don't-
Mr. President, if I may.
Mr. Major.
I know that Toledo has a lodging tax. I have to check on Maumee. I thought Maumee had one as well, but I'm not sure about Sylvania or some of the other communities. So if you're talking about just Lucas County, it wouldn't be any different than what the surrounding communities already have in place. So for starters, in terms of leveraged lodging tax. In addition to that, I'd say that the city of Perrysburg is actually, I don't know if you've read in the Blade or have kept up on what's going on there, but they're looking at increasing their lodging tax to the full 6%, to the max amount, which is what the state code allows. So I know they already have a lodging tax. I think they're at 3% now, and I think they're just looking to max it out at 6%. So adding a 3% lodging tax in the city of Oregon would match what all the other communities have. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but the idea behind a lodging tax in its inception is that people visiting a community aren't necessarily residents of the community, right? So the idea is that you're going to leverage a lodging tax on the sales of that hotel to be used for the benefit of the community. In other words, like events and beautification. All of those are eligible expenses for this, so.
Do you know where I would
that's-
find out why it's 10%? When I tried to do that online, where would I look to find out why it's 10 instead of 8? Or it's not just the
Yeah.
county tax? Says their taxes. It doesn't, I would think that would legally have to list those as different
Could be
charges.
I don't know.
Okay, just
Yeah,
curious, thank
yeah,
you.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
don't know.
Major. Mr. Mayor.
I was just say, I know that Jerusalem Township has it at Maumee Beach State Park, and I believe they're at the 6% because they collect over $100,000 from one hotel. And I know they're at capacity most of the time. I believe that $100,000 or $200,000, $150,000, $200,000 figure could be low because you'll find that the bed and breakfasts are required to pay that also. We've got quite a few of them in the city of Oregon, and more than you might realize, but it could come out to be a pretty good sum of money, especially if we had the 6% and we were to see what Maumee Bay State Park has on theirs. It could be a pretty big number.
Thank you. Council, any further questions? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 79 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallingzak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to move item number 79 of 2025 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallingzak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. We have a motion by Mr. Wallingzak, second by Mr. Horniak, to move item 79 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, I will move item 79, or we will move item 79 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda for discussion is item 80 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and our city administrator, Joe Major. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the state has issue 2 that's going to be on the ballot, this resolution we're asking that council support this, so that just shows a solidarity in support of issue 2. And issue 2, it's presented by the mayor and myself, but we should be including, Nick Roman and Paul Roman on this as well, because really it's done a lot for the city. This program has done a lot for the city over the years. There are so many things that have gotten funded through these programs, and this is just a way for us to show support for the benefits that it provides to the community. So, state issue 2 is, these funding sources that come from the state have benefited us for many years, and it's come in the form of millions of dollars. So, and I don't know if I'm doing it justice, but I don't know if, Paul, you wanted to add to you've lived these projects that have come out of this, so maybe you can kind of go through the list. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, well, so, Mr. President, if I could, the 3 projects we listed, the wastewater safety disinfection grit removal, we received $1.8 million from OPWC for that project. Seaman Norden Wind Road Waterline project that we have going out back is $900,000, and then for the water treatment plant concrete replacement was another $900,000. So it's quite a bit, 3.6 million for these projects. I mean, we've done very well in getting OPWC dollars. Obviously, we support it. That's it.
Thank you. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Ackerman.
could we focus on the fact, it is a renewal, not an increase, correct?
It's a renewal.
It is a renewal. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
right. I just want to
Not a
make sure.
replacement, yes,
yeah,
or not a replacement with
yeah.
increase, yeah.
So, just want to
Correct.
make sure.
Thank you. Council, anything further? Hearing none, excuse me. Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 80 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mr. Horniak, second by Mr. Wallenczak to move item 80 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 80 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. The next item on the agenda for discussion is item 81 of 2025, being presented by Mayor Safarian and our Law Director, Melissa Popora. Mrs. Popora.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to authorize the issuance of a purchase order to the Justice AV Solutions for the purchase of audio and video equipment and software for the Oregon Municipal Court. The court's current video and audio equipment is 20-plus years old, and it's not able to keep up with the software programs that are necessary for the operations of the court. Oregon City Council did provide funding for the acquisition of the video and audio software in the 2025 budget. In addition, in 2024, Council did accept a $30,000 technology grant from the Ohio Supreme Court that will be applied for this purchase. The total amount for the upgrade will be $77,250. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Popora. Council. Hearing no additional questions, I will seek a motion to move item 81 of 2025 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mrs. Mrs. Pauloff.
I'm
Sorry. I'm good for one of those a week, so
So moved.
I always apologize, so thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second,
Second
just to challenge
by
you.
Mr. Horn. Yeah, thank you.
Let's get him.
We have a motion by Mrs. Pauloff and second by Mr. Horniak to move item 81 of 2025 to next week's agenda. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 81 of 2025 is moved to next week's agenda. With all of the items on the agenda being considered, We will now move on to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. Just one thing I want to enlighten you about, that starting next week, the week of the 14th, the developer will be doing some utility work on the new construction that will take place, with construction on the first building to start in May. So I know we have some signed contracts with people coming into the area, and at this time we can't disclose those names, but it's starting to look pretty good there. And we sure look forward to seeing action at the front of the Kmart property.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Paul Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Horniak.
Just one thing for my standing committee, just a reminder, there is an Economic Development Foundation meeting this Friday, 8 a.m. at St. Charles. Doors open 7:30, meeting starts at 8, usually wraps up in about an hour. And myself and Mr. Mazer and our new Economic Development Director are going to a meeting for Northwest Ohio on Thursday. So hopefully next week we'll have some interesting things to share. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mrs. Pauloff.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff. Mr. Wallenczak.
No report this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mrs. Ackerman.
Mr. President, I received a couple calls from property owners that are still waiting to, they're looking in their press. When they don't see in the press, they call me looking for what the actual language is going to be about the right-of-ways as far as mowing. And it was strongly expressed to me that the city issue a letter to all the property owners in the city with right-of-way, that they understand what the expectation of them is this year, that precedent of 40-plus years of mowing the right-of-ways has ended, and that it is now their responsibilities. And I also wanted to point out that the garbage situation, the littering, I'm really glad everyone has brought input to it, but I want to clarify that we should be, the government does not need to give you permission to pick up garbage. You can pick up garbage walking into a store. You don't need a, you can pick up garbage wherever you go. Obviously, if you walk onto someone's property, I after 40-plus years of picking up along Brown Road, Route 2, Corduroy, all over, I have yet to have a property owner say, stop picking up the trash in my yard or along my roadway. So, yes, it is a good idea if you got bright colors, wear them, but want to encourage every citizen, first and foremost, have some respect for other people and don't throw garbage just everywhere. If you do encounter trash, please pick it up. It'll do you good, and it'll do our whole city good. And I applaud, and I have always, the Clean Our Streams program is wonderful, but we have garbage 365 days a year. We can't rely on some cleanup days. It has to be an everyday mindset to bend over or grab some, buy the tongs for less than $10 and pick up a bag of trash and clean up our city. And I just want to thank all those that have and do and will continue to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackerman. Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee. I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit and just want to say, we were out at the St. Paul's and that other little business building there next to it, helping to clean up that creek. We were there with the representative from the church as well as the building owner. So although it was private property, we had permission because we were there with them. But I want to thank Beth and Tom Lambrick, as well as Gene Schwind and Kay Corlett were out there as well. It took us 3 hours, but working together we can do that. And I agree. I mean, don't put yourself in any danger any more than what would just, don't put yourself in danger. But it is all of our duties to just, as you see it, just pick it up. It's not that bad. It's not that big a deal. So, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. I have nothing from my standing committee, but I wanted to mention that the April AARP meeting at Friendship Park Community Center is this Thursday at April 10th at 12:30 PM. The guest speaker is going to be Katie Moline, the Lucas County Auditor. She will speak on homestead exemption and property values, and like I said, it's Thursday, April 10th, AARP meeting at 12:30. All our welcome snacks and refreshments will be served, and that is at Friendship Park Community Center. So thank you. With that being said, and there's no further business before council, I seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Pauloff.
so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff. Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, council.